Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Risk Authority's short webinar. This is pre-recorded. It is CPD awarded by the Chartered Insurance Institute, and you should be able to claim 20 minutes CPD for this short webinar. The webinar is on BSEN 12845, clause 12.4.2, which is a recent update that was agreed with the working group for inclusion into LPC Technical Bulletin TB229. As part of the Chartered Insurance Institute award for CPD, we have to provide you with our credentials, and as can be seen on the screen there, I'm a former fully qualified sprinkler design engineer holding the 3 certificates. I have a fire diploma from the European CFPA in fire prevention. I'm a member of the Institute of Fire Engineers. I'm a member of the Institute of Engineering and Technology. My former position was as Technical Director of Argus Fire Protection, and I did 29 years within the sprinkler industry designing various types of systems as shown on the screen. My new role, or my recent role, is the Principal Consultant with the FPA. I convene the Risk Authority Sprinkler Rules Working Group and also the Suppression and Detection Working Group. And I'm also a member of the BSI Committee on Sprinkler Rule Development for FSH 18.2. Also, as part of the Chartered Insurance Institute accreditation, we have to give you the learning objectives, so we have to raise these at the beginning of the webinar, and we also have to just confirm that we met the objectives at the end of the webinar. So just to run through what the objectives are, it's to provide you with a little bit of information on why we've decided to update this particular clause, what the original intent of the British Standard clause was, and what the new proposed TB229 stipulates and the reasons why. A little bit of background information. Sprinkler inspections are carried out on an annual basis by various parties, the FPA being one of them, and also all sprinkler systems that are insured properties are subject to a minimum of 2-year sightly visits. A recent trend within the industry has acknowledged the fact that the new industrial look is becoming more and more popular, and M&E services, sprinkler pipe work, etc. is now being exposed, and this has led to some inconsistencies in design. The 3 pictures on the screen show you that there are 3 examples of how not to locate sprinklers in accordance with the intent of the original BSEN 12845 clause. As can be seen top left there, that's one of the that came from a small restaurant, what I would class as the industrial look, where all the services are exposed, and the sprinkler in that particular instance was designed at something like 400 below the soffit. The pictures on the right and on the left, as you can see, contain deep beams, and the sprinkler pipe work's been run under the beams. The sprinkler heads are in the upright position, but they are far in excess of the 75 to 150 as required by clause 12.4.2. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory and gives you the 3 reasons why not to how not to design in compliance with clause 12.4.2. Correct location, as can be seen on the 2 pictures there, our heads should be located within 75 to 150 mil, so in the hottest gas layer, so for optimum operation of the sprinklers, and that meets the requirements of clause 12.4.2. so there's a good example there of 2 pictures that show you the exact location and where we would expect sprinklers to be located to provide optimum effectiveness. BSEN 12 clause 12.4.2, it's not a new rule, it's an existing rule, and it's always been the same. As can be seen there, it does tell you in that first paragraph there that you can install no lower than 300 below a combustible soffit, 450 below a non-combustible. However, these are maximum distances. The clause then goes on to tell you, as underlined there, that sprinklers shall be situated between 75 and 150 mil below the ceiling or roof. Where circumstances make it unavoidable, the maximum distances of 300 and 450 mil can be used. However, the area involved shall be as small as possible. That rule is telling you that blanket coverage and just ignoring the depth of the beam and the surfaces above is not acceptable where a compliant design can be. So the location of sprinklers should be within 75 to 150 mil. If you have got services or obstructions that deem it unavoidable that you have to lower the sprinklers to provide adequate coverage from the spray pattern of the sprinklers, you can go to the lower dimensions, or the increased dimensions of 300 and 450, but this area shall be as small as possible. So the rule hasn't changed for many years. It's just the fact that it's just been poorly applied in installations and designs, which are findings from reports and sprinkler inspections. We, the FPA, conducted some research and testing, which, as you can see there, this was done by our Senior Trials Manager, John Harbottle, as part of his Masters in Science qualification, and the research was undertaken to understand whether adaptations to sprinkler systems are significant in the context of risk. And as you can see there, we did a very comprehensive research and testing, and lots of sprinkler activations. Many different scenarios were given, different fire sizes, different ceiling heights, and different locations of sprinklers relative to the soffit were undertaken at our laboratory in Moulton-in-the-Marsh. So it's not a case of the FPA or risk authority stating that the head should be within. There was testing to prove that it does have a detrimental effect to the operation of sprinklers the lower the sprinkler was installed below soffit. Conclusion from the trials that we did is that as John's put it in, is there the drop pipe length is actually the distance the sprinkler is from the soffit, is vital to the speed of activation of the sprinkler heads. And I think what we can categorically state is, from this and the research, we found that a standard response sprinkler installed at 75 mil from the soffit versus a quick response sprinkler installed at 300 from the soffit, the finals tested and the results concluded that the sprinkler head installed at 300 below the soffit, albeit a quick response sprinkler, took 4 times longer to operate than the standard response sprinkler at 75 mil. So it has been proven by research and testing, and part of, like I say, a master's degree award to our Senior Trials Manager, that the effect on the speed of operation of sprinklers is related to the distance it is below soffit. So the proposal that we have made for clause 12.4.2 is, again, I will reiterate, it is not a rule change. It is an additional bit of text clarifying the requirement. As can be seen there on the screen, this is what will be going into TB229, so it's additional text. It's not a change, it's more of a additional wording to assist in the spacing of sprinklers, and we've therefore used the first sentence very similar to what was in clause 12.4.2. Sprinklers shall be situated between 75 and 150 mil below the ceiling. However, we have mentioned there that you can use, dependent on the ceiling construction, if it fits within a different clause 12.4.7, which I shall now skip a slide or two ahead, just to give you what 12.4.7 applies to. So 12.4.7 relates to beams and bays where they're formed at less than or equal to 1.5 metre centres. So there is a specific design requirement that BSEN 12845 stipulates for this kind of construction, and again, beams and bay spacing in both directions, coffered type slabs there, is also covered in 12.4.7. But as you can see there, that particular rule says sprinklers shall be between 75 and 150 below the ceiling. Moving back to our proposed clause, our signed off clause, we've then gone on to say that at 75 to 150, only when positioning at 75 would it result in the sprinklers being less than 2 metres apart, such as structural features and roof purlins. You can drop the level of the sprinklers to the local such features, so you can increase the distance. We've covered this in some sketches and examples, which I shall come on to shortly. But again, we've actually clarified that any increase in depth below the ceiling is by the minimum amount necessary, which is in accordance with the intent of clause 12.4.2. So should you have to drop sprinkler location from soffit lower than 150 mil, keep it to an absolute minimum, and that's all we've done. We've reiterated the requirement of clause 12.4.2. Going on to our third paragraph, increasing the distance of sprinklers greater than 150 mil or beyond the minimum amount necessary shall not be adopted in areas where an otherwise compliant design solution can be achieved when considering such features and obstructions as boundaries. So base spacing of sprinklers is a requirement, because if you've got a 250 mil deep steel, you should be base protecting. The requirement is that you put sprinklers within 75 to 150 mil, so you should be base spacing your sprinklers, not dropping them to 300 and ignoring the beams. However, if you have got some obstructions that are in there that mean that you may need to drop them, we've referenced clause 12.4.6, and I shall jump another slide. 12.4.6 is beams and similar obstructions, so where you have local obstructions to sprinklers that may necessitate the need to drop the sprinklers lower than 150 mil to achieve adequate spray pattern spacing to cover floor area, then obviously please use the current standard 12.4.6 and design the sprinklers that way. But again, keep this to an absolute necessary. And then the final stipulation of the TB229 additional text is where we've asked anything that exceeds 300 from the soffit, you should get approval from the authority having jurisdiction, and most importantly on behalf of risk authority, the insurer, which is a requirement already for LPC rules in Technical Bulletin TB205. So again, the requirement is 75 to 150. Yes, you can drop them local to obstructions in certain areas, but if 90% of the building can be designed within 75 to 150, that should be adopted. Where you have local obstructions where you may need to lower the sprinklers, keep that to an absolute minimum. If you're exceeding 300 mil, technically justify that and get approval from the authority having jurisdiction, and most importantly on our behalf, the insurers. I shall skip the next two slides as we've referenced those and gone through them. So included in TB229, we've provided some examples. The examples are shown on the screen there. Example 1 is pretty much typical of a warehouse portal frame building with steel structure and roof purlins. We understand and we appreciate the fact that purlins are sporadically spaced, sometimes maximum 1.8 metre between purlins, but in areas sometimes they're a little bit closer. You can get them 200, 300, 400 apart. Varying depths of purlins as well, so again the requirement is that you should try and get the heads within 75 and to 150. This will depend on the purlin depth. So what we've said there is, okay, try and get them tight to the purlins. Obviously we need to be able to remove the head from an inspection and maybe a change point of view should there ever be the need to change a sprinkler head, but no further than 25 mil below the purling. However, when that depth of purling is such that the location of the sprinkler exceeds 300, it's not saying that you cannot do it, it's just justifying it to the authorities having jurisdiction and the insurer, just to state the reasons why you can't achieve the 300 rule that we've stipulated. So it just gives you an idea with regards to warehousing that we're not expecting you to put sprinklers in between every single purlin. We've taken that on board. It's covered there on example 1. Example 2 is just straightforward, where a design compliant solution can be achieved. Heads, irrespective of their orientation, upright or pendant, should be within 75 to 150, and it should be base-based. It's a requirement of the clause 12.4.2, so it's now a requirement of TB229. And example 3 gives you an example of where we have services, and the services local to such obstructions, So again, we've got maybe there a concrete soffit with downstand deep beams. Heads should be located base based, so 75 to 150, a respect again of the orientation of the sprinkler. But where you've got local obstructions, you can increase the distance. And again, what we've tried to stipulate, try and maintain these distances to within 300 and don't go any further than 25 mil below the depth of the lowest service. Again, you would probably need to include clause 12.4.6 and look at the beam the beam rule and the obstructions to ensure that you've got adequate spray patterns and coverage to the floor area. And in cases like this, we do accept that sometimes you may or may not to add some additional sprinklers, but again, local only to obstructions, not taken as the norm. And just to finish off the new TB229 recommendation, we've put a commentary and recommendation in there which just basically states the fire testing that was done. So it's shown that the distance that sprinklers are below a ceiling has a disproportionate and a detrimental effect on the activation of sprinklers. As I mentioned earlier, the lower the sprinkler, it can take up to at 300, it takes 4 times longer to operate the sprinkler. We didn't even do any testing any further than that because that was proof enough that sprinklers need to be in this hottest gas layer. I'd like to just clarify towards the end of this that this is not a rule change, most definitely not a rule change. It's just enforcing the intent of clause 12.4.2 to put sprinklers in their optimum locations to ensure effective operation, and obviously the quicker the sprinkler operates, the more chance you've got of controlling the fire below. Just finally, on top of that, the only additional requirement on TB229 is the requirement to contact the authority of jurisdiction and most importantly the fire insurer, get them involved, technically justify the additional distance, but try not to exceed 300 from soffit, irrespective of the construction. So the learning outcomes from this short webinar is obviously we've given you a little bit of background update information on the update. So what the industry, the poor practice that have been witnessed recently. So we just wanted to reaffirm it. It's not, like I say, it's not a new rule. We wanted to reaffirm the fact that where sprinklers are located is important to the effectiveness of the sprinkler system. We've given you the intent of clause 12845. Clause 12.4.2, sorry, of 12845 to show you where they said it should be, and it's also that's followed up in 12.4.6 and 12.4.7 and the new stipulations of TB229. I'd like to thank you for your time and just give you a little bit of a quick heads up. The resources that are available are Risk Authority through the FPA. A recording of this webinar will be available, and it will be available as a download from the Risk Authority website. TB229, this change, there will be a few other changes. So we have some new LPC technical bulletins that have been recently completed and signed off by the working group. These will be available as a free issue in June, hopefully next month. The slide pack for this presentation is available to be downloaded, and should anybody have any questions or queries, could you please submit them through technical@thefpa.co.uk. I would like to thank you very much for your time this morning for this very short webinar and wish you a very enjoyable rest of your day. Thank you very much.